more we give back to you, which means the more noise you make, the more clothes we take off.
My name is the Abby Cadabra, the bitch of the ball, and I am a singer, dancer, host, and producer of Burlesque in Houston, Texas. I got my name, Abby Cadabra, because when I first started Burlesque, I was with a company and I had just come off of doing a little stint as a magician's assistant. And when they saw that, they were like, oh, we would love if you did magic. You should have a magical name. I was like, okay, what about a play on abracadabra? Abby Cadabra. And they were like, oh, we love it. That's it. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I like it. Can we try other names? And they were like, sure, give us a list, but we think that's it. And so I was like, oh, okay, Abby Cadabra it is. And my first burlesque solo was centered around magic. And I might not do magic anymore, but I would say I'm still a little magical. So I've been a performer my entire life. I, as a kid, was always singing and dancing, and I did everything from gymnastics to ice skating. And if it had to do with performance, I wanted to do it all the way through high school. And then when I graduated, I knew that when I went to college, I wanted to study theater. So when I got to college, I was studying theater, but I wanted to dance and I wanted to sing as well. And so when I was looking for things to audition for dancing, I'm in Texas. Pro cheerleading was the thing I gravitated towards. So I danced for a few pro teams in Houston. And then after that, I was like, I want to keep this going professionally, but I just don't know if Houston has that kind of showgirl type thing that I'm wanting to do. Like, they've got theater, they've got ballet, they've got pro cheerleading, but what is it that I want to do? Do I want to do film? Do I want to do TV? Do I want to be on stage? Like, what is it that I really want to do? And I was like, you know what? I'm going to move to Los Angeles. I'm going to move to LA. And I had a plan set to move out there. And then I got a call to audition for this brand new troupe called the Moonlight Dolls. And they were a burlesque troupe. And I didn't exactly know what burlesque was, because to me, burlesque was either the Pussycat Dolls or Dita Von Teese. And so I didn't know what kind of show they were trying to put on, but it was very intriguing, everything that they were telling me. I was like, yeah, definitely. But just as a heads up, I'm going to be moving. I'm moving to LA. And they said, that's fine. Come audition, check it out, see how long you stay, and then, that'll be that. So I auditioned, I made the team. I started out as a chorus member, showgirl, moved up very quickly into being a soloist, and then before I was moving, they asked, would you want to be a full-time company member with the Moonlight Dolls? And I was like, wow, that sounds incredible, actually. And so when they asked me to become a core company member, I was excited because I would be able to get to do all the things that I wanted to do in Los Angeles in my city, in Houston. So what was really awesome is it afforded me the opportunity to still travel. I've traveled to Los Angeles, I've performed in New Orleans, I've performed in Australia, I've performed all over the place, and I'm really lucky that I've been able to represent my city and still get to be a traveling showgirl burlesque performer. So after a really awesome stint with the Moonlight Dolls, the plague happened. COVID hit us pretty hard, and our theater disbanded. Prohibition was no more, and the Moonlight Dolls also were no more. And there were people who decided they didn't want to continue performing, but there was a core group of us who were like, no, we want to keep performing. Like, we want to keep doing burlesque. We have it in our blood. And I went from being a singer, showgirl, host, to putting a producer hat on. So I took all the knowledge that I had from the burlesque shows and then being in theater and just kind of melded it together and produced a show that would be safe for performers and employ all these incredible acts in Houston. And I began a show called the Short and Sweet Speakeasy at Avant Garden, and we just celebrated our 3rd year at Avant Garden with the Short and Sweet Speakeasy. It's been an incredible ride, and we've had people from all over the United States hit that stage, and it's been such an honor to bring that kind of show to Houston. And then it just kind of exploded from there. I started producing more shows. So now I produce a show called the Hush Hush Cabaret at the Blind Finch Speakeasy in spring, and that's every other Thursday. And I also produced a summer series brunch show called Bisou Burlesque Brunch at none other than Bisou. And then I produced another summer series show called Cocktails and Teas at Soho Garden. And then I produced a pirate burlesque show called Teas of the Seas, Sultry Songs and Pirate Booty at the Texas Renaissance Festival. I went from being a showgirl to being a producer, and it's been a wild ride, but I'm really excited that I've been able to put on these incredible shows. And, you know, in my heart, I'm more of a classic burlesque performer. I love the showgirl glitz and glamour, but we do all kinds of different shows in Houston. We have all kinds of different kinds of burlesque, and I think that's what makes Houston so wonderful and beautiful, is that we have all these different kinds of performers that make our city so colorful. So the beautiful thing about burlesque is there's all kinds of different kinds of burlesque. You can be comedic, you can be classic, you can do neo-burlesque, you can do fetish burlesque, you can do nerdlesque. There's something out there for everyone. So when people are like, oh, I just don't know, like, I don't know if burlesque is my thing, it's like, I'm sure there's something out there for you. And if, you don't know if it's for you, make something up for yourself. Like, be innovative, be creative. Like, I perform in a blow-up unicorn costume. Like, be silly, have fun with it. Burlesque is fun, burlesque is beautiful, burlesque can be ugly, burlesque can be provocative. And there's just all kinds of different kinds of burlesque out here.
Cara Cherie. So I used to work at Prohibition, and I gave them a few names and they turned most of them down, and then I just came up with Cara is my real name, and I think they had something against like us using our real names there. Some of us could, some of us couldn't, I don't know why. And I was like, I think my name was Valentina J'adore, and then 2020 happened and I was like, I hate that name, that's just not me. I feel like I'm Cara, and I liked Cherie, so I just put Cara Cherie instead of Valentina J'adore. And yeah, Cherie, I don't know, I think it's just sweet. It's like French for sweetheart, I think. So I've been a dancer for most of my life. Since 7th grade, I've been a part of a dance team at my school. I love dancing. Once I started dancing, I couldn't ever stop. And then I graduated, and then I never even stopped dancing then. Like, I would just dance in my living room, and if I bought an apartment, I wanted to dance there, and I wanted to make sure my living room was big enough to dance in. And then I eventually started like actually stripping at strip clubs, and mainly for money, but it also was kind of a challenge to, like, you're still performing in a way. I did that for years, and I was just not fulfilled at all. I felt like I was living for the male gaze, and it wasn't fulfilling to my passion for dancing, and it wasn't even about dancing there. So I was eventually asked to come to a burlesque show. It was actually, I think it was Dita. I was given tickets to go to a Dita Von Teese show, and I was just obsessed with all of just everything about it, sparkle and the dancing and the choreo and the just ridiculous costumes and props. I was like, I have to figure out how to do this. And then I was at a bar once, and I met another girl, and she was part of the Moonlight dolls, and she was like, we're having auditions in like a couple weeks. You should just come. And I was like, so beyond nervous. Like, I almost turned around so many times on the way to that audition, and I'm so happy I didn't. I'm really happy. I was convinced I wouldn't make it. I was convinced I'd be the worst one in the class, and I was just like, I don't even know why I'm doing this. And then I made it, and I was like, oh my god. And my whole life just like changed. Like, I was like, whoa, like this is exactly where I want to be. I don't want to stop doing this, and I haven't since. So yeah. It's a lot. I think there are a couple ways. It either starts with a costume idea, and then I have to find the song, or I find a song and then I want to craft a costume to match it. And I'm very picky, aesthetically speaking, so I will change my mind like several times. Like, I fully have made like costumes to go with the song, and then I will fully perform it, and then I'm like, this needs to be totally scrapped and I need to start over, or I love the costume, I need to change the song, or I hate the costume and I love the song. So that's where it starts, and then I get out a notebook and I'll just draw what I think the costume should be, or I'll write down song ideas, and I'll even add, like, if I want a corset, or if I want to do heels, or if I want to do boots, or if I want to do gloves or anything, or like, I'll also write in specific like tricks, like, or like snaps, or like zippers, like, or parts in the song where I want to make sure that my corset flies off at this point, or any detail that I don't want to forget, I have to write it down, because I'll get too excited and I'll just start working, and then I'll like come back and I'll be like, wait, I wanted to do this at that part. So that I start in a notebook, and then I buy all my costuming, all my costumes, my fabrics, mostly my bras, underwear, and corsets. I try to buy them white, so that I can dye them all at once, so that they do match, depending on like if I want them to match. But yeah, then I buy stones, and it's a lot of what's the word? Resourcing. I'm constantly, just for fun, I enjoy this. I'm just scrolling on eBay, AliExpress, Amazon, like, or I'm looking on at ideas on Pinterest or on Instagram, and I'm piecing together like every little thing. And sometimes it's perfect the first time, and then sometimes it takes me several tries to get a costume together. And sometimes I will fully just change a costume just because it's not working, and that's okay too. So yeah, and then I stone it, and then I wear it, and I sew it. I do all kinds of things. It's a lot. It takes months. I love drag queens. I am fully so inspired by drag queens. I think drag queens, makeup-wise, just outlandish costumes. I love them. I'm obviously, I think it's hard to like act like I'm not influenced by Dita Von Teese. Like, she's just so great. And then there are a few. I have a whole album on Instagram that I just have saved burlesque performers that I just love to like go to that album and just look at their stuff and not copy them, just get inspired and be like, wow, like I should do a Western. And I did, and I should do something that I'm not really even comfortable with. like a flapper or a tuxedo act. I'm also inspired by, I grew up with the movie Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. I've always been obsessed with Marilyn Monroe, and anything that Judy Garland did, I was obsessed with. That act started because I think I heard White Rabbit by Jefferson Airplane, and not like I heard it for the first time, I heard it once recently and I was like, oh my god, this is inspiring me. Like there's something needs to come of this song and I don't know what it is. And I was kind of going through the motions of like, should I like plan to put together some kind of like groovy 60s psychedelic show? That would be really fun. And then I just kept like working with it and I was like, this is giving Alice. I want to be Alice. I always loved Alice in Wonderland. That was like one of my favorite Disney princesses who isn't a Disney princess. I was inspired to do that, and I kind of knew that it was somewhat bookable because you do have to keep that in mind. Like, you can have this out crazy idea and just be like, but what show would I do it at? Like, I can't do my Alice act at a classic show. Like, I have to do it at like maybe a Nerd Lust show. Thank God Nikki Knockout exists and her mind just works in similar ways and she just wants to do crazy things and give crazy people a platform, a stage. But yeah, I put that idea together. I was like, okay, well, you know, she needs a dress, you know, she needs an apron. Do I want to go more Hot Topic Alice? Or do I want to do classic Disney Alice? Or do I want to do new Disney Alice, which is not what I wanted to do at all. I didn't want to do Hot Topic or New Disney. I wanted to do cartoon Alice. And I want to kind of stick to even the cut of her apron. I wanted it to be as on point and like the same as the Disney version. And but then with the twist of like a mushroom and like, you know, Jefferson Airplane talking about taking a trip and yada yada yada.
Welcome to the Rock and Roll Review. In case you didn't know where you are, I'm your ghost host with the most this evening, Ghoulia Child. I'm also going to note, if it looks like I'm looking at you, I'm probably not because my contacts are drifting in 2 different directions right now. And man, this is looking both ways. So, whose first time is it here at a burlesque show?
My burlesque name actually comes from the Monster High dolls, which I'm so excited that they're making those again. But one of them is named Ghoulia Yelps. And if you're not familiar with Monster High dolls, they're all of these like classic horror movie monsters, but as cute young high school girls and Barbie dolls. And so I took the name Ghoulia from one of the dolls, and then I sat in the shower for a really long time trying to think of a funny name that went along with Ghoulia, and then Ghoulia Child came to me, and it was the perfect like spooky, goofy name. And then as far as getting started with burlesque, I got started actually doing the Rocky Horror Picture Show 10,000 years ago at River Oaks Theater, back when they still did it there. And the very first role that I ever did was Trixie, who comes out and does a striptease to science fiction double feature. And I was so nervous, I thought I was going to throw up, but I did not throw up. I found out I actually really liked it, and I kind of just kept chasing opportunities to do it again after that. I am kind of the rebel bad kid of the bunch that never does their homework. I can't believe I'm revealing my secrets here. So a lot of my ideas for acts usually just like come to me as a vivid hallucination while driving my car and listening to music. I will usually hear a song and then
I just kind of see the whole thing all at once, and I'm trying to like jot down notes as quickly as I can so I can like remember what it was that I saw in my mind's eye. And from there, I guess it's really just trying to like remember that and recreate that grand vision that I saw the first time. I don't spend like too much time rehearsing and like doing very like set choreography. Eventually an act starts to develop its own set choreography because I will notice that there are certain moves that I like different parts of an act when I'm performing it, and I'll continue to do them, but it sort of just evolves along the way rather than becoming like something that I've set in stone before I take it to stage. Okay, so the first thing I always do is I think of like the name of the show, which sounds silly as hell, but I love an alliteration. So the very first show we did was the Rock and Roll Review, and I did that because the bar that we were doing at was called Rudyard's, and so then I was just picking out as many R words as I can that like appealed to me, and so that's how we ended on Rock and Roll. And I kind of even do that on like a miniature scale when it comes to each month's show, is I usually like pick out the theme and the title of the theme for the show, and then I will search through my memory banks of like who I know that has acts that I feel like really fit that theme. I'll also reach out to people that I just like really admire as performers and tell them what some of our upcoming themes are going to be and give them, you know, the opportunity to tell me what they have that fits that. And then I also take submissions from people and let them bring to me things that maybe I've never even seen before. And it's usually a mix of those three things come together to make each show. And then I usually handle more of the creative, sparkly side of it, whereas my partner, best friend, stage manager, Grim Lynn, she handles more of the like the nitty-gritty details as far as like who needs to be where when, and you know what needs to get picked up and put down in certain places is usually what she handles, because she is very good at managing chaos. I'm really good at making chaos. I'm almost positive everyone's going to tell you about the liquor closets that we get changed in. The worst that I have ever had has definitely been a men's bathroom while men were still in there using it. You couldn't even give me the women's bathroom. But I think maybe one of the other less glamorous sides that a lot of people don't realize is for a lot of us, we all put so much like work and love into this. It all starts to feel very personal all the time, everything that we do. And as we interact with each other, a lot of things that other performers do as they navigate through this community, we can take it personally. And so I often say that we have to remember that we are not all best friends here. We are coworkers, and most people are not going to look out for you like they would your best friend. They're going to look out for you like they would your coworker, and they're going to be like, hey, don't trip, rather than like, you know, really reaching a hand out to help you a lot of the time. And that's okay, and you can't take that personally, because we don't all have the like mental space to like really focus on what everyone else is doing and their emotional state at all times. And a lot of us though, I going back to that, like, this is our baby and this is something that like we hold very dear to us, it's very easy to like take those perceived slights from other people, and we have to do a lot to take care of our own mental health a lot of the time. And I feel like that kind of is the unglamorous side, is like making sure you're not overreacting or underreacting a lot of the time, because some of what we do is very like different than the real world and how we act with each other. And what's considered normal interpersonal relationships here is probably not your normal business relationships anywhere else. I'm gonna be vain for a minute. A good host is important. It is key. And either recognizing like if you are a good host, or finding someone that is and paying them to host your show is so important, because they're gonna be along with that audience for the entire journey of the show. And your host a lot of the times is gonna be the one that, like, if there's an accident, a flop, if something happens, because it's live entertainment and something always happens, they're the ones that have to like pick up the pieces and keep the ball rolling, and do it while smiling and making sure that everybody else is having a good time still. And so I think that is like a very, very key element. And then I also think having good people working on your show outside of the talent is very important, because everybody knows that like you should book visually interesting, compelling acts for your show, because that's what people want to see. But the people that like actually like do all of that work and effort to put it up on stage, the ones that are like making sure that we have beautiful lighting, the ones that are, making sure all of our costume pieces that we've thrown into the audience make it back so we can take them off and throw them into the audience again. Those people are really the ones that like keep that show going, because you don't really notice it a lot of the time, but you notice it when it's bad, when like you're waiting 30 minutes for a show to start and you're just like, oh my god, come on, get it together. Or when the sound is like cutting out, or the lights cut out, or when there's problems, you know when they've gotten it wrong. And so I think some of the most important people are the ones that when they get it right, you don't even know they were there. So we actually have kind of a different audience at my show than a lot of the other burlesque shows I feel like seem to get. In that like a lot of burlesque shows will tell you that there are more women than men that come to their shows, and that is more often than not the case. At most burlesque shows, it's a very like feminist, empowering thing, and our show is as well. But I think being a rock and roll show and kind of like the way we advertise, we end up finding a lot of like middle-aged men who come to our show because we're always like, Rolling Stones, Metallica, and they're into that. And so we get them in the door with like no idea what they're about to see. Like they've never seen burlesque before. Like all they know is like we've got rock and roll strippers. And then we expose them and ourselves to like what burlesque is, albeit kind of a weird version of it. And we also like expose them, I feel like, to a lot of like queer and alternative cultures too, that like they may have not like necessarily been so open-minded about in the beginning, but they had so much fun with us that they're gonna sit and listen now. And we get a lot of people that end up coming back that like they've never even like seen another burlesque show. It's just kind of like we're the weird rock and roll strippers, and they keep coming back for more.
I started with the Moonlight dolls, like I think Abby Cadabra may have mentioned that as well. And I was actually given a name when I started at the Moonlight dolls, and I think it was Miss Kitty Dior or something, and I didn't like it. So I actually lied to one of the directors there and said that that name had already been taken so I could change it. And I chose Valentina because I was first of all inspired by the drag queen Valentina, who's a very beautiful performer. And I wanted something very feminine and sensual, and I thought Valentina was a good fit for that. And then I chose J'adore because I wanted something really sort of luxurious sounding to top it off. And I was a big fan of Dior, and that's one of their signature perfumes. So I just put the two together, and that was my new name. So I saw an audition for the Moonlight Dolls, which is how I got started in it. I had graduated from theater school. I have a BFA in musical theater. I think about 8 months before I auditioned there, and I had already had sort of a secret desire to try burlesque. I knew of Dita Von Teese. I had seen a lot of her interviews and little clips of her performances when I was in high school, so I already knew what burlesque was in a sense, but I'd never tried anything like that. So I just showed up to the audition. It was, I think, a 4-part audition. It was a dance round first, and then I think the second part was going to see a show that they did there, and then there was an interview, and then there was photos and sort of just seeing how you looked in the costumes. And I kept getting further and further to each round and got the job. And I really only intended to keep it for a few months, and then I had kind of planned to start going back to theater and auditioning in that realm again, but the more I did it, the more I fell in love with it. And so I never really left after I started that job. For me, it usually starts with the music. Each act is individual in what exactly inspired it first, but I would say probably 85% of the time, my ideas for acts start with the song. It's kind of hard to describe. I'll usually just kind of visualize it as I'm listening to the song, and then from there, I'll usually mull on it for a while, because sometimes you'll have an idea and then once you think it through, it's not a good idea. I'll start listening to the song quite a bit and really thinking about if that's actually going to work. Once I know it is going to work, then I'll start thinking about costumes and concepts and sort of what kind of a story I want to tell with the act, because I, as a theater geek, I like telling stories. I like my acts to kind of have an arc to them. So once I figure out that arc and the costume, then I'll get into the rehearsal space and play around and choreograph. I used to choreograph every little move. Now I kind of just make a framework and say, I'm gonna do this move here, I'm gonna do this move here, and in between is kind of fluid and leaves room to play with the audience. And there's of course exceptions. I have some acts that are very choreographed and that's the way they have to be, but yeah. And then once you put it on stage, for me, it's always still changing. You find more things, the more you perform it, you change little things, you take this away, you add this. So for me, acts are constantly evolving. Sometimes I'll put them on hold and change the costumes, So yeah, it usually starts with the music. There's been a couple exceptions where I know I want this concept to work, so then I'll go and search out a song that's really gonna fit it. But yeah, for me, usually with the music. Obviously, Dita Von Teese, she is the queen of burlesque for a reason. She really did bring back the revival that we see today. Burlesque was really sort of obscure and, like the fetish scene, very underground up until Dita, and then she really brought it back, and she brought back fetishism as well. And yeah, we all owe her a lot for all the work she did, so she's definitely a huge influence and inspiration. The New York scene is a huge inspiration to me. Those girls really dance their asses off and act their asses off and are really talented artists up there. Media Noche is a New York performer I look up to a lot. I mean, I find inspiration from a lot of sources outside burlesque too. I really like couture, fetishism. I run a whole fetish show that's fetish and burlesque combined. Art, so I love going to art galleries. I get a lot of inspiration from that for like color palettes and imagery, film. As far as burlesque, a lot of the old Hollywood, of course, like the Ziegfeld Follies. Vera Ellen is one of my favorite stars from sort of the 40s, 50s era. She was a beautiful dancer. She's in White Christmas. The unglamorous side, it's probably how much work it takes. It's how much work it takes and how much money it takes. Money that you don't necessarily get back unless you're working a lot. It takes a lot of work to be a professional burlesque dancer, and I do think there is a distinguishing factor between hobbyists and professionals. And to be a professional, you really do have to work your ass off. You have to constantly be in the rehearsal room. You have to constantly be upgrading your costumes. You have to constantly be learning, going to classes. I still go to classes even 7 years into this profession. So it's a lot of work, and no one owes you anything. No one owes you booking, no one owes you help. So you really have to get out there and market yourself and put yourself out there, go to shows, do all the work yourself. But that's also one of the things I love about burlesque, is it's made me into a more well-rounded artist, because I've had to learn how to do all these things I would have never have learned how to do if I had just stuck to theater. So yeah, you have to be very well-rounded and learn a lot of new skills on the fly. And then the other unseen, unglamorous part of it, I would say, is the pay. Burlesque does not pay as much as people, I'm sure, think it does. There are some gigs that pay a lot. You can make your rent in 1 month with one gig, but then another gig is gonna be $100. And in this economy, $100 is not a lot. I don't think that at all. There's quite a few girls in the Houston scene who have done a really great job of paying their dues of kittening, working backstage, going to classes, asking for advice, going to shows, watching shows. They're doing everything correctly. Steps for me, the first thing I recommend to everyone is go take a one-off class if it's available. And there's also a lot of online classes right now too that are great. But take a one-off class. And let me clarify, this is for people who have never been on stage before. I think the pathway is different for people who have professional experience in other performing arts. You already have some training, some idea of what stage presence is. But for people who just see a burlesque show, haven't had training or experience or much experience, go to a class, see if you actually want to do this. A classroom is a really safe environment where you can explore your sexuality, which is a huge part of burlesque, without feeling judged or feeling pressure. And if you really like it, you really like the class, go invest in a course. If you like the course and you graduate the course, then I would say get into like some professional dance classes, some acting classes, even some music classes. That's going to make you the well-rounded performer you need to be a professional performer. And while you're going to classes and learning and doing all those things, go to as many shows as you can, work as many shows as you can. Kittening is what we call our stagehands in burlesque, and it's basically picking up the clothes that we're flinging everywhere, and sometimes you're working the door as well. You're getting a really good look at how everything operates backstage. And sometimes it might even include a little stage experience. So kittening is absolutely where you need to start, even if you've already taken this 6-week course. It's going to give you all the experience, and it will also teach you how to be flexible and work on the fly, which is something that's pretty important for show business. In my opinion, what makes a great burlesque show is a group of polished performers. First and foremost, you need a really great host who can keep the show running in a very smooth but funny way. For me, I always write out my lineups as a producer. I always give my host a script because I like my shows to be really tight. I don't like the host really going off script too much. So yeah, for me, it's about tightness. It's about you have a nice interlude, then you have an act, then you have a game, then you have an interlude. It's just tight is the word I keep coming back to. And then hiring good people. as a producer, I'm pretty picky about who I hire. I like to be able to trust that they're gonna be there on time, that they're gonna have everything together, and that they're gonna give a good performance no matter what's going on in their life that day. So yeah, it really just, for me as a producer, it all hinges on the performers I hire. So I try to hire the best. As someone who came from theater, where in theater, a lot of things are given to you to interpret. You're given a role to interpret, you're given a script to interpret, and then you have a director kind of guiding you through the space and through this journey. So you're given a lot of things to then go and do with what you will. With burlesque, it's just, you have a blank slate. It's so open to so many different types of creativity, and there's so many different things you can do with it. I think that's why I keep coming back to it and why I've done it as long as I have, is there's so much more I can do. And that's what I love about it the most, is all types of different artists can find ways to do different things with it. You know, circus artists come in and do something completely different than what I would do as someone with a theater background. And that's the beauty of it to me, is it's so open to being influenced by so many different types of art. And it's just joyful too. It's a joyful expression of sexuality. And we don't have enough of that in the world, in my opinion.
Staging with Nikki Knockout. I came about because I initially started with aerial as my primary focus in burlesque. So when I started, that's how I got into it. But I would do a lot of like clubs when I worked with aerial specifically. Before I actually got into shows, I would do like ambient aerial at a club or something, and people are always like walking around me and in the way, and they like are drunk or whatever, so I would accidentally kick people a lot. But also I really wanted it something along the lines of like bombshell, but also like fierce. And I think that like all encapsulates me. It's like very like kind of rough around the edges, but like watch out. My start with burlesque came from circus first. So I was doing aerial for a while. I loved it the most. I never even considered doing burlesque at all. I initially saw an audition for a show looking primarily for aerialists, but in a burlesque show. And I was with a guy at the time, and I told him about it, and he was like, no, you have to take your clothes off for that. And I was like, but I get to do what I love, which would be the first opportunity to be showcased that, and it didn't matter to me. So fast forward, broke up with him. And then I met a woman that had a show, Tifa, Twilly actually. She does the Dim Dam Dames. And I saw her show. It's like a Lord of the Rings parody. It was amazing. It blew my mind. And I was obsessed, and I wanted to be a part of that. It was beautiful, but funny and weird and innovative and creative. And so she had a show that was ironically, I just had my fairy tale burlesque show, but she had a fairy tale burlesque show, and it was kind of an ode to that as well. But I wanted to do a aerial. So I got a tail, and then I essentially took the tail off. And that was my whole burlesque routine, was I just took a mermaid tail off and then did aerial in the air. And she allowed me a space to do that for the first time and entrusted me. And she had to see me do my act first to make sure I wasn't just gonna flop on stage literally and figuratively. But yeah, that was my first time, and I was obsessed with it because everybody loves you and they love what you do, and they are so nice, and it's such a supportive world, I think, in a world that isn't necessarily very supportive naturally. It really depends on, well, first and foremost, what the show is. So there's different styles of venues, of course. There's bar shows, there's theater shows. Maybe there's like smaller theater shows. So I think about the stage and where it is, who's gonna be there, what they're into. The demographic, of course, goes into it. There's like older crowds, younger crowds, and there's like crowds that are really like niche and they're really into like something. I really love themes. Like, I love a good theme, especially themes that like are culty, that like have a big following and people are like crazy about, or maybe that's a little more like under the radar of themes, less traditional for sure. And then yeah, I kind of think about what I can do to like blow their minds. Like I want to be really innovative. I want to do something that like they haven't seen before. Like I love that. I want to make sure that like people are constantly like surprised. I think that's the whole point of us, is obviously like a surprise. Like, you know, like you're of course you're taking your clothes off. Like we expect that. Everyone expects that. That's what they came for. It might even be more surprising if you don't. But like on top of that, like how you do it. And like I want to do it in an interesting way that people don't expect. So they leave like really happy or inspired mostly. I really want to like inspire people and inspire them like to be creative and also like loving themselves, because that's like what we do on stage. We're like loving ourselves so much so that like everyone else loves back. And it's just like this big massive love, which is fun. So it's always, I mean, I host my own shows, of course. Sometimes I'll host other people's shows too, so I try to consider that for sure. When I'm hosting other people's shows, like I want to make sure they're also very much showcased, because oftentimes I'm the one talking and that's what people see and hear, and they think like I'm in charge entirely, and I'm not. I'm just like often the face and the thing they hear and what's like leading the show, which is super important. So I try to like consider that, but like for my own, I really just want to like make people feel really comfortable, really good about themselves, laugh for sure. I mean, that's a big part of that, and that comfort and feeling good about themselves, and welcome, and like make sure everybody feels welcome at all times. We're never like exclusive, especially in like gender and like sexuality and all that. Like just like it's all, everybody is included and more than welcome. And I try to like show that in my casting too. It's very important to me. But making, yeah, with hosting, just really being myself. I think people really like that, which is weird. Like even if I fuck up or something, I try to keep it real and try to like make it funny and just laugh at myself, because that's really the way to do life, is just to laugh at yourself. Once I learned that, like everything got so much easier. But yeah, being me and fully and wholeheartedly and in all those vulnerable areas too, because that's also what makes like people like that. People want you to be vulnerable. Nobody likes like a perfect, pristine, everything all together all the time. Like I guess what you would expect. Like, but it's nice to have. But I think people are drawn to me because like they might not know what to expect at all, which I really enjoy. So yeah, my influences, and I mean, obviously like I have such a big span of like performance-based, but in burlesque specifically, when I put it like one of my biggest influences is like Tifa Tiddlywinks of the Dim Dam Dames. She like put together, produced, hosted the first show I ever saw, which was like a Lord of the Rings parody, and it was phenomenal. They had like video recordings. They made like a little movie they would show on the screen like midway through to keep the storyline going. She made a Game of Thrones show that I got to be a part of once, and it was the best show I've ever seen or been a part of. It was like a fire-eating dragon. But I think she's such a big creative influence, because like the opportunities for production are like endless. Like it's not just like a burlesque act. It's not just taking off your clothes. It's not just dancing. Like every single act is like how are you being that character? Why are you doing what you're doing? Like, how are you taking your clothes off? Like, okay, if you're an elf, like, how are you being an elf taking your clothes off? Like, or why are you a stripping elf or something? I think another big one is definitely like Kiki Maroon, who was another like Houston like producer native. I think she's such a like workforce. She's like a fierce hard worker, and she like knows what she wants and goes after it, and is hilarious. And I think she brings like that level of comedy to hosting, which I really admire, and I think is really polished too, because you do have to be like a bit of a comic as a host to make people laugh and feel comfortable. Obviously like Dita is gonna influence, I mean, she influences all burlesque performers, like that's gonna be everyone's answer. I just think I like her level of production. It's huge, and that's like the level I aspire to. It's like, I want big props. I want big stages, I want lots of dancers. Like, I think that's definitely like, as a burlesque show, the core, like that's where it came from, essentially. It was like that level of production, giant lipstick bull riding, and that innovation. But also a lot of different like circus artists and flow artists and aerialists and dancers, and like all the different types of artistry that I've like been really delved into, because it all like flows in, and I take a little bit from each thing that I love and like put it into my routines. And sometimes I'm like, I do too much. Like I don't even showcase like a quarter of it in my burlesque. So it's like, do one thing or pick one. Some people like singing and doing fire and aerial, and it's like you're doing all three in an act, like that's too much. Like do one really well. That's kind of what I like want to do. Burlesque has empowered me and myself in many ways. I mean, obviously, like I now get to make money off of it and pay my bills, and that's very empowering, and it's made me independent. So in that way, which is phenomenal, but also like who I am, I don't think I really knew who I was before. I think I thought I knew who I was, but I wasn't confident in it, and I didn't feel powerful in it. And I think through burlesque, and especially hosting, I found who I really am, and not worried about it as much. Not worried about what people think about it, or if they like it or not. Like, I know that people do. I mean, they obviously like are coming and buying a ticket, and they keep coming and more. So it's like, obviously they like something. So that's very empowering. It's also obviously given me a lot of like empowerment in my body, which I never had before. Which I think a lot of women struggle with, because like we're sold these images from Victoria's Secret and just like media all the time about how we should look, and no one looks the same. Not any one person in the single world looks the same. But to be on a stage that like, you love yourself, they're gonna love you, and that's all it takes. And like, even more so, like if you're not perfect and you love yourself, they're gonna love you even more, because like that relatability is such a good message. It's so empowering for other women to see women with cellulite and like bigger bodies, or just like even people maybe that are paralyzed, like performing, like and feeling like really powerful, like or disabled in any way. Like it's such a beautiful message to share with all people, not just women, all men and women alike, that they should feel good about their bodies, and we should all be worshipped for that. And like being on stage in that moment and getting worshipped by your audience it's gonna make anybody feel powerful. And I totally understand why everybody wants a piece of that and to be a part of that, because it's like feeling like God sometimes. You gotta actually like keep your ego in check because if you don't, like, then stuff happens to people for sure. in a world that doesn't really make us feel loved or important or good about our bodies, especially. It's like amazing to be a part of a world that not only like loves that, but it like worships it. And like you are that like figure, whoever you are, no matter what you look like. Because as long as you're like confident, as long as you're confident in yourself, that's all that matters.